Welcome to the Women Who Give podcast. I'm Alex McCall, and I'm the host of your show. In this podcast, we talk with different individuals who are exploring and working on women's philanthropy initiatives here in the UK, but also globally. And today we have the amazing Alexa Charlton, who is the head of individual major giving at Newcastle University, and her team leads on the Women's Giving Circle. The Women's Giving Circle was established in 2010 and works to raise funds from prominent female alumni who wish to give back. The initiative provides scholarships to girls from disadvantaged backgrounds who are studying courses where females are underrepresented. What I'm really excited about for this conversation is that from my research so far, Newcastle University is really one of the only institutions here in the UK who are actually convening women in a giving circle. And so it's really amazing to be able to hear what this initiative has been doing over the last 10, well, almost 15 years now, and what the future holds. So thank you so much, Alexa, for joining us today. Can't wait to get into it. And to start, it would be really great to hear from you about your background and how you kind of got into supporting the women's giving circle at Newcastle.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me. So as Alex said, I'm Alexa. I'm head of individual major giving here at Newcastle University. And I have worked in higher education for about 12 years now. So I started my career at the University of Manchester, and then I moved to Newcastle University in 2022. And for me, I've always been really interested when you work in a university and you're a fundraiser in a university, your kind of main pool of prospects are alumni. And when I first started my career, traditionally, the majority of people we spoke to were male because, just because of demographics of who was studying in the 70s, 80s at university. And I've always been interested of how those demographics will shift over time. We all know now most universities, it's about a 50-50 split of male-female students, and that'll kind of project onto our alumni demographics. So when I joined Newcastle, I was really interested and really happy that they already had this in place. So they had a women's giving circle. And basically, I've just worked to try and strengthen that program that already existed since I started.
Amazing. So can you tell us a little bit more about the Women's Giving Circle? What does it look like? Who do you have involved? How many people are there? Tell us everything.
Yeah. So it was originally launched in 2010, and it was very much, we had one very enthusiastic female alumna who wanted to get women giving. That was as simple as that's how it started. And she was really interested in women in STEM. She thought there was a distinct lack of women in STEM, wanted to know how we could support more women in that area. And it started okay. It raised just under 40,000 in the first few years, but then it kind of waned after that. So it was mainly due to all the usual things, staffing changes, different levels of interest in it. And then we had a pandemic. So it kind of got put on hold a little bit. However, around 2019, 2020, we were seeing a lot more women giving. This wasn't necessarily something we were actively targeting, but we started seeing our demographics slowly shifting. We had two very large donations to the university, both from female philanthropists. So we thought, you know what, actually, the original chair who started the circle was still really interested. We had her on board. We had another alumna who was really interested in restarting the circle up. And we also have our Dean of Advancement, who is female as well, and was really interested in this area. So the three of them kind of relaunched in 2020. And since then, that's kind of where I've picked it up from there. So, do you want to know kind of what our audience is, that type of thing?
Yeah, that would be great. And it would be good to know, I guess, too, what about Newcastle perhaps, lends itself to being a good environment for this initiative to really work?
Yeah. So I think for us, we realized women perhaps give in a slightly different way. A lot of the women we were interacting with, our kind of major gift fundraisers, were finding that a lot of them wanted to give maybe slightly smaller levels. They wanted to give between that £1,000 and £10,000 mark, but they also, a lot of them didn't just want to give. They wanted to mentor students. They wanted to volunteer their time in some way. They wanted to support students, because I think a lot of them knew that females struggled, not just while they were at university, but then getting jobs in the graduate market. So they really wanted it to be more of a holistic approach of, not just financial commitment, that time as well. And although we have loads of fundraising priorities here at the university, the one that females tended to be kind of supporting was students. They wanted to fund kind of undergraduate scholarships. So what we did was, back in 2022, we decided, actually, we used to have this circle where it was just people could give to a circle. They were, stewarded in your part of the women's giving circle, which worked, but it wasn't the most effective use. And we found, actually, they wanted to know what they were giving to. They wanted to know something very specific, something very tangible that they could give to. So we launched the Women's Giving Circle scholarships in September 2023. So very, very new, but they've been really successful so far. So the idea was, most of these women wanted to fund undergraduate scholarships. We knew that. And then it was a case of, okay, well, why don't we support women where they're underrepresented subjects? So mainly STEM subjects, but also some of our business studies courses where there's an underrepresentation of women in them. And we decided, okay, we want to launch at least 2 scholarships in 2023. Then the idea, we have at least 2 in 2024, 2 in 2025, and see where we go. Within the first 12 months, we managed to raise enough funds for all 8 of the initial scholarships.
Wow, amazing.
To support those students throughout their entirety of their degree as well. So we were really pleased with the response, but it does show, we've done our research. And I think that's the thing. I think if you're launching this type of thing, it's working out, what do your alumni want? What do they want from a giving circle?
And were you engaging in conversation with those kind of key alumni who are involved in the actual circle, or the chairs, or, who are you talking to kind of get that information around what is going to be the most attractive offer?
Yeah, so the first thing we did was really go back to our prospect research team and work out who on our database do we have. So we started with kind of going through all our female alumni, really doing some up-to-date research on it, which I think is the most important thing. We know women are much harder to track than men. They often have career breaks for families. They often change their names. It's often a lot harder to track them down. But I think it's worthwhile doing it, and it's a good investment piece, because they are going to be your prospects of the future. So we started with that. We started with getting that prospect pool ready. And then we just started going out and talking to women and just asking them, it wasn't an ask for money. It was what do you want to see from the university? What do you want to be part of? And a lot of them, I think it's that kind of empathetic nature of the way women give. They wanted to give together. They wanted to pool their resources. They wanted to feel part of something. So we that was kind of where we started, and it's kind of grown from there. And we do an online event every year. So we do just to meet the student beneficiaries who are receiving the scholarships. And we also have kind of a few key speakers at that event. So it might be an alum, it might be a really inspiring academic from the university. And it's very much just an opportunity for them to meet each other as well. And we always ask at the end of that event for any feedback on the event, but also any feedback on the circle more broadly. Is there any changes we need to make for the year ahead? So overall, it's going well so far.
And you're quite a small team, aren't you, who are managing this, which I think is also, it's interesting. There's a couple of themes that keep kind of coming up, I guess, in the research, but also in the conversations I'm having. So it's this convening nature that women really, really like to convene, to really get into the organization. I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about that, if you've seen any kind of long-term partnership development or relationship growth over time. But then the other piece is that, a lot of these organizations who are running these circles are really starting off really small. There's only a couple of you kind of going at it. So despite all this amazing work that you're doing, it's only a couple of you, isn't it?
Yeah. So our whole fundraising alumni team is around 25 staff. And in major giving, in my team, I've got 3 fundraisers. So and 2 in stewardship. So it is a very small group of us. But actually, I think if you're doing it in that group setting with females giving together, it does save you a lot of that resource and time. So, we've made a few pitfalls in our time through the Women's Giving Circle. So things like, we thought these women would want to network with each other. We assumed that, which is always my top tip of never assume what people want. So a few years ago, we did a fancy event in London at a members club, trying to get these women to meet each other and meet students and kind of feel that warmth from the university. Our sign-up rate wasn't great, and our conversion rate was even worse on the night. And we realized, actually, these women want to give back to students. They want to give their time to students. But, some of these women are kind of peak in their careers. They are time poor. They don't want to necessarily meet in central London on a weeknight and, have drinks with each other. That isn't what they wanted from it. And for some universities or institutions, that might be what your donors and your alumni want. But I think it really comes back to, you need to ask them what they want, because we've done other things. Like we do direct mail appeals, and normally they're quite generic for our student fund, our scholarship programs. But we did a recent one for period poverty, kind of targeting female alumna. And we had it match funded by an alumna as well. And it went well, but it had a massive impact on campus, which is the most important thing, and on our students. But it didn't do as well as we'd hoped. And I think it was because women didn't want to give to those kind of targeted appeals. They wanted to see the bigger impact of, they like the scholarship scheme. They like that we're directly targeting women in STEM subjects, that type of thing. So again, I think it goes back to always going back to the data and always going back to asking them what they want and having that donor-centric approach.
And can you talk about any kind of shifts, I guess, you've seen like over the last 10 years of this, or closer to 15 years now, of this circle going, where you're seeing kind of growth in relationships and that changing how individuals are giving? Are you seeing that at all?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing more women giving, first of all, but I think that's because we're actively targeting more women. So we have around 500 females giving at the moment.
Amazing. Wow.
Who've given in the past 2 years, which is great. Just under 30 of them are giving at what we'd call that major gift level. So for us, that's kind of £10,000 plus.
Yeah.
And that is kind of year on year increasing.
Yeah.
Interestingly, 2 of our biggest ever donors to the university are female philanthropists. But interestingly, they're both non-alum, and both of them have chosen to give to research, not students predominantly, which doesn't match our trend. So I do think they're slight outliers, but it does show, I think, that work we're doing, that relationship building, has paid off. But I think for us, we're seeing much more of women kind of giving more regularly and higher amounts, which is great. And I think that's because as well the stewardship matches what they're wanting. So we are sending, annual reports directly showing the impact of their donations. It's not broad impact of things on the university. It's a very targeted report, very short and sweet, about what is their money directly doing. And I think that type of thing really appeals to them, that impact led, seeing results. So we're seeing more women, seeing that kind of steady rise in donations. So for us, it's kind of now we're going to do the scholarship scheme again in this September, and then it's trying to grow it even further. So we would ideally like to fund 5 to 10 scholarships every year rather than 2 to 4. And then I think we'll go back to, is there something else these people want to fund, or is it continuing with a scholarship scheme similar, or is there something else that's more appropriate?
I think it's so exciting hearing you talk about these numbers. And you and I have spoken a couple times before, but honestly, I think the fact that you have 30 women giving at that 10,000 plus level, especially in the kind of higher education space here in the UK, is such a huge success. I mean, I think even in the US, where fundraising in higher education is a lot more advanced than perhaps here in the UK, just because of the kind of history of it, that is still an amazing level of success. And interesting around how many you have in the broader pool, so that 500, because something that I'm quite passionate about around engaging women, especially in higher education, and where I really see there being an opportunity is that this is ultimately an opportunity to really start having conversations with your alumni from when they leave university and get them kind of thinking philanthropically about your organization, whether that's £10 a month or £10 a year. Then when they're kind of at that level in their career, when they can actually really give back on a significant level, they've been engaging with you, they know what you're doing, because actually universities are incredible vehicles to create change. It's not just charities who can do this. We are doing research, we're helping students get education, but there's a million things happening at a university. You can really have such an impact, like the two philanthropists you're talking about who actually aren't even alumni of your institution. It's such an opportunity to actually create huge scale change. But if we just kind of don't think about how we engage an audience who might have different kind of interests or different needs, then we're really missing out on that kind of pipeline development, ultimately, from a kind of fundraising perspective.
Yeah, and for me, I think it's really as well about not putting limitations on things. So I know working at different universities and talking to different universities, it's often like if they're setting up a circle, they're like, but what's the criteria? Is it amount people have given? Is it number of years people have given? That kind of thing. And for us, when we were setting up the Women's Giving Circle, we didn't really set any criteria for it. For us, we didn't want there to be any barriers to being part of this. It wasn't you have to have given X amount or you have to have given over so many years. It was anyone who wants to can be part of this. And as I say, when it started, it was just any female who wanted to give could give. Whereas now it's very much, do you want to give to this very specific scholarship pot? And I think that's what our alumni have responded well to. That's what they like. They like that inclusivity. So we really value any contribution. So if someone wants to give us £5 a month to that circle, they are valued just as much as if they're giving £10,000. So in our largest donation to that so far has been kind of just under £20,000 pledge to that circle. But I think that will continue increasing as time goes by, because I think people really value that type of giving.
I think getting, the visibility out there as well of this initiative. So, it's still fairly new and it's kind of redesigned version. So it does take time to kind of grow these things. Yeah. When we spoke before, I recall you kind of saying that, and you're kind of referring to it now, you got going with it, really. You took the leap and you decided to really move ahead with it, and you were able to have that agility. There's kind of two philosophies I'm finding, I think, in this, in the ways that you can do this. You can either kind of get stuck in and just go ahead and launch it and go for it and fix the things as they're not working as you go along, or you can spend a little bit more time, and typically more risk-averse organizations will really want to think this through and do lots of research and have lots of consultation before they get going. And both of those have different merits in doing it either way. So from your kind of approach, what have kind of been some of your key learnings? And perhaps, I guess you mentioned a couple challenges as well. But what are your reflections on the kind of approach you've taken?
Yeah, I think sometimes you just have to not be afraid to try. I think the problem is, as you said at the start of this podcast, that there aren't many institutions doing this. So I think you haven't got that much learning to go off. Normally you can kind of ask other universities, what have you done, or ask other charities and kind of learn from there. So I think for us, it's just you have to get going. And the easiest way, most universities have huge alumni pools where you have these people who are willing to speak to you and willing to give you feedback and advice. So, why not start there? And I think it's a bit threefold of working out, do people want to solely give? Is that kind of, that's it? Do they want to feel part of that network of giving? Or do they want to be part of a circle because they want to network with each other? And I think when we launch circles, we often think it's that latter one, that they want to network with each other. So I know lots of universities have circles for people who can give over a certain amount. And often they do, you know, annual events for everyone who's given over 100,000 or everyone who's given over 1 million. And that might be what that audience want, but that isn't necessarily what all your female alumna want. So yeah, ask basically. Yeah, and I think thinking about what that ask is, what are they giving to? We found our female alumna want to give to a scholarship program. It might not be that's the same in all cases. More people might want to do research rather than the student focused approach. So I think it's not just assuming what the ask is either. And then I think it's not just taking the data as is. So when I first looked, I was like, oh, we haven't got that many female alumni on our database, or we have, but we haven't got many contact details for them. That shouldn't be, okay, well, it's not worth it. It's then next steps of, yeah, what can you do about that? Can your research team, if your research team doesn't have capacity, can you send it out? Can you get someone on this? What we also did was the chair of our Women's Giving Circle, we got her, any females who we didn't have contact details for, we got her to try and contact. She was out searching LinkedIn. She was, you know, writing letters to people on our behalf. Who can you use as your advocates for this? And having, you know, 2 or 3 real advocates of that program, it helps massively, especially when you're like us and quite a small team. It means that work is shared, and yeah, they bring on board a lot of people. And it's interesting, we just did an event for something completely unrelated in London, and two of the people who were attending said, oh, well, whilst I'm there, I'll make sure I bring some other female alum with me. So
Amazing.
because they know it's one of our priority areas, they then know, okay, I'll try and help you with that as much as I can. So yeah,
that's fantastic. And can you share a little bit more about, I guess, how you've utilized peer volunteers to kind of help you? So you have the chair, and then I think you mentioned you have, is it a dean as well who's kind of supporting it? So have those been key people in this process of you really kind of growing this initiative?
Yeah, so I think not many universities have deans of advancement or deans of fundraising, whatever you want to call it. But most universities will have a dean of international, a dean of culture, that type of thing. But having a dean of advancement, I think, is amazing for us, because she is there as kind of our, you know, outward facing. This is what philanthropy at Newcastle does and achieves. So she's been a real support of helping us with that. She will chair a lot of our events. She will speak to any donors we want to. She's regularly in London and across the UK, and we'll send her to meetings. And then we have 2 co-chairs at the moment of the circle, and both of them are donors. They are one's an alum, interestingly, one's not an alum.
Okay. Great.
But they are both donors. They are interested in different things and supporting different things, but they get that wider picture of what's important, and supporting more female students is high on both their agendas. And it works because they are quite different. But I would say having kind of those 2 senior volunteers driving this activity really helps. It helps with resource as a small team, but I think people sometimes listen to their peers, don't they? They listen when they're saying, you know, guys, I'm supporting this, you should too. They're also not afraid to ask for money. So at events, at the end of every event, they stand up and they say, I'm giving, are you going to too?
Amazing.
And you know, that is amazing for us, because it helps. And they say, you know, after every event, we then say we will directly follow up with a proposal for the Women's Giving Circle. And then one of the fundraisers individually follows up with every guest. We don't feel like doing the whole, we use .digital, lots of people use MailChimp, you know, we don't feel like using those mass comms really works for this group. They all get personalised one-on-one emails from a relationship manager, which we feel is, a nice touch after an event, so they feel connected to the circle.
And how frequently are you doing those events? Do you say you have like one kind of big one a year?
Yes, so we do one every year. So around this time, our next one's in July, just so they can meet the student beneficiaries of the scholarship at the end of the year and hear how their year's gone. But donors are welcome to come back to campus anytime. So often we've had quite a few donors this year come back and meet with the students. And we also try and so we have kind of our general annual supporter thank you events in Newcastle and London, and we'll often take the Women's Giving Circle scholars or others down with us so that they can speak to a larger audience and kind of engage with that work. So yeah, so that's our, at present, our event schedule. As I say, we tried a more London network type event. It isn't something I'll be repeating immediately. But that's just for our alumni audience. I think given where they are in their careers, they're all very busy. They're all, an online event really works for them. It matches what they want to do. And it also matches what they want to know is what's the impact. And that event, it does that. So
do you find you have any kind of key, is there a certain demographic that you're finding a lot of your donations are coming through? Is it, like 35 to 50 or,
It is a really mixed spread. Yeah, I couldn't even put a category on it. It is kind of very different ages, very different backgrounds, women from all different careers. The thing that unifies them is the want to support more females.
Amazing.
It's not, and it's interesting. I thought you might get a lot of science engineers because the scholarships are quite focused on students in courses that are underrepresented, so which is often predominantly STEM. But actually, that's not the case. We have a lot of business leaders, a lot of lawyers, every type of career path that's in that circle. And I think that's because they understand the overall goal is to get more women at university.
Yeah,
that reflects on the job market. You get more women in senior positions, more women in board positions. Long term, we're all after the same aim. So demographics very varied.
And I guess in some ways having a focused message as well helps to just, even if you don't study that topic in particular, I guess if you keep kind of seeing the content coming out, you're going to be like, okay, like I get why there's a need for that. And, I want to see change in that area as well. Or like but if you experience any kind of exclusion yourself at all, you'll probably want to help others kind of not face the same barrier. So I can see how that could work actually, as opposed to having like a lot of different things that then kind of be like, oh, I could do this, or I could do this, or I could do this, or I could do this. It kind of streamlines it a little bit. So what would you say are your kind of biggest successes so far from your perspective?
I think for us, it's the amount of women giving. I think, as you say, for UK universities, that is quite rare. And that's women giving all the way from your kind of £3 a month, all the way up to the major gift level, and then that transformational level. I think we have a lot of kind of senior staff who are female as well, which really helps on our exec board, our dean of advancement. So they're advocates for this type of work. And I think it's the buy-in we've had from alumni fairly quickly. I know the program has been running since 2010, but really we only relaunched it in the past 4 years. And to have that much success already, I think that's really hopeful, because I think that means, give us another few years, where could we be? How many more women could be giving? And also that means how many more students can we be supporting, which is the overall end goal. It makes me much more hopeful for our female philanthropy.
And is there any kind of challenges that you face, like internally or even externally? I mean, again, you've kind of mentioned a couple like the event didn't really kind of maybe land as well as you thought it would in the kind of other campaign. I guess also thinking internally, it seems like you've kind of had a fairly easy approval process, which can sometimes be one of the kind of challenging parts, just because there's so many different competing priorities. So to actually prioritize this can be difficult. So has there been anything that's like been a little bit sticky at times and you're kind of had to work through?
Yeah, I think, as you say, I think internal buy-in, we are very fortunate that our team are very happy to prioritize this work. And I think it's getting universities to understand how important this work is, because the demographics of our alumni are shifting. The demographics of females kind of on equal pay to men is shifting. So ultimately, they are your prospects of the future just as much as your male audiences. And I think it is really taking a deep dive into your programs, and are they right for all audiences, or are they very male centric? When I started in fundraising, we still gave out ties as gifts for major donors. We didn't have a female equivalent, So I think things are shifting in the right direction, but it's what else is there to do. And I think we sometimes do assume what people want, and we assume what female donors want. We assume they'll give at smaller levels, or we assume they only want to give to one thing. So I think it's often kind of understanding what's out there, what your database looks like, what your female alumni want. And I think it's all too easy to just assume what people want. But yeah, I think our challenges, we've overcome a lot of them, mainly just trying things out. And I think you have to have that ability to try things out. And I know, as you say, often it's hard to get that internal buy-in to just try things out. But we've tried events, some have worked, some haven't. We've tried different asks, some have worked, some haven't. We've tried direct mail appeals. You know, with this type of work, it is so new. So you do have to just try, and some things will work. And I think the more universities that do it, the more we can learn from each other.
Amazing. And what would, if you could summarize, I guess, your maybe kind of top 3 or whatever it might be, before it could be 10 if you have them, kind of recommendations of essential things that organizations should really be thinking about / doing when they get into this work, what would those pillars be?
I think it's do your research, first of all. In the same way, if you're starting to fundraise from a certain country, you would look at kind of culture of giving, you would look at everything else like that. Do that for female philanthropy. Although there isn't that much resource from the UK, there is amazing stuff going on in the US and elsewhere. So we can still learn from that, even if it's not completely kind of something we can replicate here. So I think do your research on what's out there in the sector and understand kind of that culture of giving, the way women give, how women give, what they give to. I think your second thing is really your research, your own database. You need to invest in working out. I know I've talked to many universities where they've said, oh, we don't really have email addresses for those women, or we don't know what their current surname is, or whatever it may be. It's like, stop making excuses. If this is important, you just need to get on with it. Yeah. So, and it will be worth the investment long term, even if you don't see immediate results right now. So get your database. And then I think, make it a priority for your fundraisers, for your alumni engagement team, whoever it is, to go out and speak to women. It might be you've got the resource to do some small focus groups, or do some small events, or whatever it may be, that'll help you get in touch with as many women as possible in a most effective way. And ask them what they want. Be donor centric. And then I think my other thing is, which we haven't really thought about yet, is a lot of these women want to volunteer. So we have our Women's Giving Circle scholarships. They can mentor and speak to students as part of that. But if you don't have a specific scholarship program for women or a specific ask, does your volunteering as a university match what women want? So our alumni engagement programs often work quite separately to our philanthropic programs.
Yes.
And I think you need to marry them up more if you're going to be successful in this space, because often female alumni want to volunteer in different ways. So just thinking about, it's something we definitely need to look into. I don't know the answer if our engagement programs are right for our alumni right now, but it's do they match what females want? I think that's it for top tips.
I could not agree more. I think the and that kind of follows on with another piece you talked about earlier on, which was around the impact. So this engagement piece, figuring out what sort of engagement is it? Is it the networking, meeting other alum and kind of, just connecting with other people who, might have a shared kind of interest as you? Is it actually connecting more with the students and giving back in that capacity? Because the research shows that women do want to be involved, and it's figuring out how they want to be involved. Yeah. And then that ultimately helps them. The other piece where women kind of differ is that they really, really want to know what the impact is that they're having. They want to understand where that donation is going. And that's exactly what you said throughout, of really being super clear around where their giving is going and how they're making an impact. And when you put somebody in a volunteer position, they can see it, they can experience it, they can feel it. And it actually makes fundraising a little bit easier for you, really, because they're getting to see firsthand what that impact is. And I couldn't agree more that I've seen, I think the challenge of having opportunities to engage women is one of the biggest hurdles of actually being successful in cultivating women. Because what we know about men is that sometimes it can be a little bit more transactional. So they're much more kind of willing to make a donation without having kind of maybe met a student, let's say. That's just kind of some of the trends within male philanthropy, particularly in the US, where a lot of this data is pulled from. Whereas women want to read more about what your organization's doing. They want to meet benefactors. They want to meet people involved in it. They might want to volunteer for some time, and they might make it start with a smaller gift and kind of then grow it over time. And if you don't have those engagement touch points, what are you going to do to really bring them closer to you? You're kind of like, oh, here, read this story, So I think that is such an important piece. Would you say that that's something you guys are kind of picking up on in your engagement with women in your circle?
Yeah, definitely. I think it is that whole piece of I can't think of any of our female philanthropists who want to just give and not hear anything further, or don't care about meeting students. The hardest challenge for us is not overusing the students almost, and letting them get on with their education, because we have so many people who want to meet them. And we have so many alums who are willing to come back to campus because they really want to understand, even if they live, in other countries, they're coming back because they really want to see what is the impact of this program. They don't just want to give and that be it. And it's little touches, I think you can also do nice stewardship touch points, which we haven't really thought about. So before that online event, we send a little handwritten postcard. It's that type of thing, just again reminding them of the impact that it's having. And getting them kind of ready and excited for that event. So they might not all be meeting in person, but they've had a nice personalized touch from a fundraiser or from the student.
That's amazing. I like those kind of elements as well of really being thoughtful. And I guess what I've seen in working with women philanthropists is there is a slightly different relationship that's built when you are kind of stewarding women. They oftentimes reciprocate that. Actually, as a frontline kind of fundraiser, I've really received that kind of thoughtfulness and consideration, from them, if you're really kind of building that relationship in a different way than you kind of experience with some of your male donors. So you really have to, I don't think a lot of our systems have been really built to be kind of attuned to those changes. So it's really interesting to hear how you're kind of actually trying to address it through little touch points.
And I'd say look at your whole stewardship program, and it could be that it's perfectly right for male and female audiences, but it might not be. But have you ever thought about it? Look at what you're sending. Look at, most people have stewardship circles of some sort, or a basic level of what every donor receives. Just check what it is. Do a bit of a review of it and just see, is it right for all your audiences, or is it not as accessible for some?
And so, I mean, this has been super, super interesting. I could talk to you forever about this topic because you and I both really love it. So what do you think is the most exciting thing on the horizon for women's philanthropy more broadly, but also for your own institution?
Yeah, I think for me, it is around women-centered philanthropy just hasn't had enough airtime. I was reading the other day that less than 2% of philanthropic income goes to female-focused projects. And I think that's shocking, really. We know females are still underrepresented in job markets, on senior level boards. And ultimately, you have to start that change as early as possible, not just universities, all the way from school level. But if we work in universities, we need to be making that change. Otherwise, nothing will ever change. And I think it was amazing, Melinda Gates's recent commitment to female philanthropy. I think we need more people like her, more of those really prominent female figures to be doing the same and joining forces and, just making a commitment to this. And I think for me, I'm just really excited to see what could happen. I think in Newcastle, we've, seen a bit of success in 2 years. What we're going to see in 10 years, what we're going to see in 20 years, if we really focus our approach on this. And also, as more universities do it, the hope is we'd all learn from each other. Most of the times universities are doing very similar things because they know what works. Whereas this is kind of uncharted territory. So I'm really looking forward. I want other people to come on board. I want other universities to get on it, and so that we can all chat about it and learn from each other and learn what's best. And yeah, I'm just excited to see how many female donors we have in the future and how many students we can support.
Absolutely. Well, as we said, the demographics are changing, and I think that whether you organizations want to do it or not, they'll probably have to do it in 20 years because their alumni base is half women. I mean, that's not the reason why you should be doing it, but they're probably going to be have to kind of go for it because that's the kind of audience that they're going to be working with. But yeah, I think Newcastle is just such an amazing example of why this is so important and what the possibility is with it. And I think even in the US, where philanthropy is so embedded in the culture, the fact that still, I think that stat you're sharing about the 2% going to women's based charities globally, I think it is a global stat. And so the fact that we, probably one of the most prominent philanthropists, if not the most prominent philanthropist, Linda Gates, is kind of having to be the role model for what this could like in this day and age. You would think that already made such huge progress in this area is kind of surprising, really.
Yeah.
But I think we're seeing women have greater control over assets and express that, and the visibility of women's contribution to the economy, to philanthropy, to decision-making around wealth is just becoming more visible now. And we have to keep talking about it so people understand, I guess, what the opportunity is, because yes, it's great for our organizations, but ultimately we're missing out on helping people if we don't harness the potential of everyone who wants to make a difference in the world. And philanthropy really is that avenue that you can really make a direct impact. So, it's exciting to see what will happen. And I'm just so grateful for Newcastle for doing this as somebody who's researching this topic here in the UK. And was kind of triggered off of the back of the interest of how higher education can do this. It's great to have you guys as an example. So thank you so much for all of your work in this space.
Yeah, thank you for starting this podcast and shedding light on such an important issue.
Amazing. Well, it's my absolute pleasure. I could do it all day long. So thank you so much, Alexa. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today, and good luck with everything. And hopefully we can have you back maybe in a year or so to hear how things have grown from strength to strength.
Yeah, we'd love that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alexa.